So we're pretending that a beer was just poured, or that...
No. We're pouring a beer. I mean, the framing's a little weird, but why don't you just tell everybody that welcome back, and we're actually at a new brewery now.
Welcome back to the Genus Brewing channel. Today we're in our fancy schmancy new brewery.
Totally complete. Not really, but complete enough to do this video for you. And we are drinking the much anticipated Skyrocket Rye IPA beer. I don't know, the random smorgasbord there. Bing! So let's go ahead and crack this guy open and see how she tastes.
Yeah, I know how that goes.
It did get a little overcarbed. I had it sitting at 20 PSI for like 5 days.
Trying to crash down all those protein hazes, which we'll get into a little bit later, talking about clarity and how to get it, how to not get it. And we're meant to be able to call Kent and ask about what the actual origin, the history of this hop is.
So it turns out Skyrocket is actually Chinook.
Chinook!
And, but Kent was very spot on. It doesn't taste anything like the Chinook that's grown somewhat locally here in the Yakima Valley.
Yeah.
And another thing to notice with this beer is it's really turbid. And yeah, we're going to talk about that after we taste it. So
yeah, let's go ahead and dive in. Let's just jump into this. Let's just dive on in and smell and taste. And
so I think first off, that berry-esque characteristic really follows through in the nose of this beer.
Even 3 weeks old, I get like dominant, like blueberry, I think is kind of the dominant berry that I get, but it's still so present in this.
As soon as you taste it, it's spicy and it's herbal.
Yeah, very spicy, very herbal. And you do get a little bit of that like kind of classic bite that you get off of, I would say, using a regular Chinook like you have in the Northwest. That bite, that bitterness, that aggression.
Yes, definitely.
Still there.
Yeah, despite the fact that I think we had a dry hop and just a giant Whirlpool edition.
Yeah, that's all we did.
Like the 10-ounce Whirlpool edition, no big deal. Yeah, I think you do get a little spiciness from the rye as well. So I think that just kind of builds up on it at the same time. And otherwise, very old school hop flavor profile.
Yeah, so it's not. I wouldn't say it's multi-dimensional. It doesn't have like kind of that background cattiness that you get built up with something like a Simcoe or a Citra. That you've got some flavors and then that cattiness that kind of gives you that like.
What if you
double up? That berryness is very soft, but it's so present, especially since we 10-ounce Whirlpooled this, that it's unmistakably there, but it just doesn't lean into a lot of other flavors like you'd expect some other hops to.
So from there, I'm just going to go right on to some of the flavors I'm picking up that probably aren't the best, and I think one of those flavors is that classic extract beer flavor. And I think that's mostly due to, I remember we did look at one of those jars, and it was a pretty old jar of extract. And so it definitely has this sort of oxidized, slightly sweet malt profile. Otherwise, despite the turbidity, it doesn't taste terribly yeasty. This beer has been cold conditioning for a week and a half, actually close to 2 weeks now, I think. And
that's a drinkable beer. Like
so all the yeasts drop out. The turbidity is straight up from, I would contribute it most likely to protein haze.
Yeah.
And I think that is a good transition into our next topic of this video.
What causes haze in these kind of beers, and how do you get rid of it if you want to?
Pretty much. This beer, the haze is definitely from proteins in here, partly due to the fact that we used rye extract, which is going to have a lot more proteins than just typical barley. And then another thing, I think what caused the haze, on top of hopping it a lot, which helps fix those proteins.
Oh yeah.
Is
it's how we hop it too, because those hop some of those hop oils actually can combine with proteins during the fermentation process, and it, like you said, it fixes that into suspension in a way that makes it so that it will not fine out. Like it's not going to drop out with time. It's just going to stay and create a relatively murky beer in general.
And then there's 2 more things that we did on the brew day side of things that definitely don't help when it comes to having clear beer in the end, and that is 1, finding our kettle. We did not add any Whirlflock, any Irish moss to this, which probably would have helped significantly. And then 2, when it came to chilling our wort, we chilled it. Just watch the video, you'll see.
Yeah, you saw the costume change in the middle of it, and somebody commented on the wife pants.
Yeah, it was not a fast chill. It took like 4 hours to chill this beer down before we actually pitched the yeast. And that definitely doesn't help with what's called your cold break, which is taking some of those proteins that are going to glob together when you add that fining agent and drop them down to the bottom. Let's transition into some stuff on the backside. Something that if you end up with the beer looking like this after a couple weeks in a fermenter, things that you can do, fining agents that aren't gelatin, that you guys might not know about, and kind of how the fining process works.
So the thing you have to know is that there's two different polarities of molecules that are in your beer that are creating those haze. At the pH of most beer, proteins actually act as a positively charged particle, whereas yeast is still, it's got a lot of free aminos or nitrogen on the outside of them that act as a negatively charged particle. And so to get a perfectly crystal clear final product with finings at the end of it, a lot of times the way you do it is with a two-stage fining, and that is, it starts with clearing out the proteins first, and so you start by adding in a negatively charged particle like biofine, for example, like Kiesel salt, which is another kind of biofine, and I think gelatin is actually also a negatively charged. It works in the proteins and not the yeast.
It does, yeah.
So you start with the negatively charged fining agent to clear out the proteins, and then you finish that with a positively charged fining agent, so you can drop out all those yeasts. And that's going to be finishing like with chitosan, with isinglass, things like that that'll drop out the yeast.
So imagine that I'm protein because I'm positive, and Peter is yeast because he's
bitter reproduction. What were you talking about? Water sucks.
Wait, like water from the toilet?
And finally, another thing that you can do is actually just run your beer through a filter if you need to, which I've made Logan do, and it works out really well.
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend that. Definitely wouldn't recommend that unless you want to stand for hours over a keg.
So let's walk you through a brew day if you're going to get a crystal clear beer. The first step, and I think the most important step, is actually picking your grain bill around something that's going to clear up. That means low protein content grains, which usually means higher modified grains.
Yep. Sticking to simple grain bills, a lot of just pale two-row, barley, avoiding things like oats, avoiding things like wheat, rye, spelled?
Sure.
Hey, those kind of things.
Anything that's not barley is higher
anything
protein.
that's not barley, basically.
Yeah.
And then I think the second step in the process would be when you go to mash in, if you can do it, try to do a protease or protein rest at about 120 degrees Fahrenheit, give or take, before you step that up to your typical mash rest, in the 150 range. What that's going to do is it's going to further break down your proteins in there, your beta glucans and stuff like that, and keep those out of the final beer.
And it'll also give you higher efficiency too, because those beta glucans, they act as a gummy agent basically that makes it so that when you're sparging, you're going to get channeling, and you're going to miss some of the sugars that are going to be in your grain bill. So that protease rest, it's a good step to do if you have the time to do it, just for efficiency as well. The other thing is on the boil side, first of all, really hoppy beers, generally speaking, just won't be clear. Those hops, those oils, they create murkiness in the beer just naturally. If you have a really, really hoppy beer, there's a ton of oils in there, and you'll get a little bit of that kind of murk. But also, doing a lot of hopping in the whirlpool, and if you dry hop during active fermentation, those hops will glom onto starches and proteins and make a haze that just doesn't settle out. And then, like we said at the very beginning of this video, all the fining agents, using something like Whirlfloc, Irish moss. We like super moss because it's super moss, so it's obviously super.
And we use a lot of it, and it's cheaper that way.
It is. Using super moss on the boil side of it, and then using those other fining agents, the Kiesel salt and chitosan on the back end. Like I said, you're positively and you're negatively charged fining agents on the back end, two-stage fining for a crystal clear commercial beer. And that's what you got to plan on doing if you want that clean quality every single time, and that shelf stability too, because it's going to make your beer last longer. Hazy beers, they're great, but they need to be drank fresh because they don't have a shelf life.
Thanks for sticking with us today on the Genus Brewing channel. Hope you learned a few fun facts about fining beer and how not to find beer in some other cases.
Follow us on Instagram if you want to see the progress of this build out. Turning this into an actual functioning brewery is going to be super fun, not for us, but for you to watch. So follow us on Instagram if you want to see that. And comment below if you've got any other questions on the whole brewery building process and what you guys want to see. Sorry that we're not getting out videos as often as we would like to. This has taken up a lot of time, but we still love you and we miss you.
That's what I tell Peter every single night.
Yeah.
Have a beer, folks. Cheers. What's our motto now?
Viva la beer.
Viva la beer.
Viva la beer.
And I can really see, like, you got a nose hair hanging way down out of your nose right now. At your right nostril.
Right nostril?
Right nostril. It's a big one. No, it's hanging down now. I can see it again. I can see it. Oh, no, it's like out of your front coming down. What is that, 18 minutes? Like 15 gigs of footage.